Well, hello to all my Lighthouse friends who are joining me online. This was not supposed to be a live video. I was supposed to record this, but I've been having so much trouble with my phone today that the easiest way is just going to be for me to put it out there live. So this will be abnormal. We're not going to do a live video over the summer. We post a lesson each week because I know as the summer comes, the days get longer, you're outside working in the yard, you're outside playing, baseball games and those sorts of things. So this is this will be our first not live video, but it's live, so here's a bonus for you. Okay, I want to share with you a story tonight that is going to build from week to week, and this is beginning the story of Joseph. If you want to read this story, you can find it in the first book of the Bible. Anybody remember what the first book of the Bible is? Genesis. And this is Genesis 37. Genesis is an appropriate name for the first book of the Bible because Genesis means beginnings. And it talks about the beginnings of our world as God created the world. The beginnings of God trying to redeem his creation as the world has now been subjected to sin after Adam and Eve, and the beginnings of his people Israel. And we're going to talk about Israel tonight. Well, here on the screen we have Israel, we have his 12 sons, and in particular we have his youngest son Joseph. Now, you might know Israel by another name. Israel was born with a different name, but God changed his name. Let's see if you can guess what Israel's original name was. Israel was born a twin. He was the second born, so he was the youngest twin. But he received the blessing and the birthright of the firstborn. Can you think of who he is? His brother was Esau, and so this is Jacob, of Jacob and Esau. But God changed his name to Israel when Jacob was wrestling with God, because Israel means contends or wrestles with God. That's an appropriate name for him, and it's an appropriate name for the nation of Israel. And oh, by the way, that's where we get the name, the nation of Israel. The nation of Israel are the descendants of Israel and his 12 sons. And his 12 sons became the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. You might remember some of their names, like Reuben or Judah or Benjamin or Joseph. And tonight we're going to talk about Joseph. Well, Joseph was the favorite son of Israel. And in fact, he was so much the favorite that his father loved him so much that it made the other brothers very, very jealous. Can you imagine what it would be like if you had 12 sons, but the father loved one son the most? Can you imagine how they might feel? Maybe they'd be sad. Maybe they'd be angry. Well, the Bible says that Israel loved Joseph so much that he made for him a coat that was very expensive and very elaborate. And sometimes we call that the coat of many colors. And the Bible said that made Joseph's brothers hate Joseph. And it says that they never had anything nice to say about Joseph. Now that is hard. It's hard to think about having hate even in your own family. But there's a lot of us who know what it's like to have hard things happen and hurt happen in our families. Sometimes even some of the hardest things in life happen in our families. Well, Joseph knew what it was like to have disappointment and hurt and conflict in his family. We'll talk more about that too. Well, not only did Joseph's coat make his brothers hate him. But Joseph had a dream one time. And he told his family about the dream. And this is what he said. He said, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose up and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." And his brother said, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule over us?" Now they're thinking, you're just a little kid. Not only do you get all of Dad's attention, but now you want to be in charge of us too? So it says they hated him all the more because of what the dream was and what he had said. Now, look up here. Joseph had a second dream. Hi, Gavin, by the way. I see you logging on there. Joseph had a second dream. There's something going wrong up here. There's too many stars and sun and moon for the middle of the day, right? Okay, that's because they represent what he saw in his dream. It says that he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen, I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." Maybe we'll put him up here. That they were bowing down to me. Now, his father and his brothers understood that this meant that the sun represented Israel, the moon represented his mother, and the 11 stars represented his brothers. And so now even Israel said, "What is this dream? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous, but his father kept this in mind. Now, fast forward, we'll learn about this later as you read the story of Joseph, but that actually will happen because later Joseph ends up in Egypt, and his father will send his brothers to Egypt to come buy food in the midst of the famine. So that's kind of neat how that worked out. But for now, what it did was it really made his brothers mad. Well, let's change the scene a little bit. What happened was Joseph was sent out to visit his brothers who were out in the fields, sent by his father. I should probably take this off here too. He was sent to go visit his brothers. And as he was coming, his brothers saw him from afar, and this is what they said. They said, "Here comes that dreamer. Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns." A cistern is a well, and this has been dried up. And so let us throw him one of this cistern here in the wilderness, but let's not lay a hand on them. What they wanted to do, they wanted to kill him, but they didn't want to do it themselves. They just wanted to leave him in the cistern and let him die. The cistern was empty and there was no water in it. They just wanted to leave him there. Now, while they were doing that, let's see here. When they were talking about this, they said Reuben, who was the oldest, Reuben said, "Well, let's not take his life. We don't want to shed any blood." And then they said, "Throw him in the cistern, but don't lay a hand on him." So sorry about that. What he wanted to have happen was he wanted to actually come back and save Joseph. He didn't want Joseph to die, but he didn't have the guts to stand up to the rest of his brothers. Now, what would you do? Would you have the guts to stand up to somebody who was wanting to harm somebody else? Reuben knew that it was wrong to kill him, and wrong to do what they were doing. But he convinced them not to do it with their own hands, but just to leave him into the well. Well, that sounds like a good idea, but it backfires. Because later, for some reason, we don't know why, Reuben wasn't there. Joseph was in the well. His brothers had taken his coat of many colors, and there were some traders that came by. And they had things to sell, and they wanted to buy things as well. And Judah had this idea. He says, well, what will we gain if our brother dies and we just cover up his blood? So he said, let's sell our brother to the Ishmaelites and let's not lay a hand on him. And this was his solution, because they thought, well, then we won't be guilty of killing him, and then we can also get paid for it. And so when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern, and they sold him for 20 shekels of silver. And they took him to Egypt. Now, when Reuben came back, he was heartbroken, because his intention was to save Joseph. But now he lost his chance, because he had already been sold and taken away. Now we are going to continue this story, and we'll be following Joseph's story all summer long. And as we do, we will notice that bad things keep coming to happen to Joseph. But every time they do, God is with Joseph. And the Bible will say it over and over again that God was with Joseph. And even when bad things happen, God has this amazing, amazing way of transferring it into something good for Joseph. And later we will find out that God will even use Joseph in some amazing ways. And Joseph will recognize that even though other people tried to hurt him, God used all those things for good. Okay, well, that's our story for tonight. Hope you are having a good week. Like I said, this wasn't supposed to be a live broadcast, but it ended up that way. Check back next week. We will hope to have a video posted as we will continue the story of Joseph. All right, have a good week. God bless.